Great. So I want to welcome everybody to the 2021 annual GLREA year begin meeting. And I want to thank all of our members and all of our sponsors, though Kendall's going to talk about the sponsors in a minute, for supporting us. We have what I think is a great agenda. You should have received 4 documents, all 4 on Thursday, and then I resent the program agenda this morning. The 4 documents are obviously the program agenda, and then I sent you a list of bios of all the speakers and in some cases moderators of the various panels. Now, the one set of speakers I didn't put their bios on are the ones that will be doing the GLREA reports around noon. And that is, Kendall, our president, Diane Van Buren, another board member, and John Sarver, Carrie Church, Mark Clevey. None of those I put bios on, but I think most of you know all these people and certainly will get to know them even more after today. The third document is that we have a panel to talk about the role of the utilities, what we just talked about. And there's a document on how utilities influence politics, just a 2-page document that gives you a flavor of the sophistication, the amount of money, and the various ways that money gets spent in order to influence policymaking in Michigan, and for that matter, around the country. And then finally, this is I sent out the memo on relational organizing that I made a shout out to Marcia Curran a few minutes ago about how we continue to want to build this organization, increase the membership, and we want to launch a campaign in 2022 where literally I'm asking all of you to help us to recruit more members. And so those are the documents. We will hear panelists put some slides up occasionally as well. So the final thing I want to say before I turn it over to our president, Kendall Kunman, is, again, please remain on mute while you're not speaking and while our panelists are making the presentations. And we plan on having time for all of you to be able to ask questions as our panelists complete their presentation. So at that point, you can go off mute. You can also put comments in the chat, and I'm going to be monitoring chat to look at the comments that are being made. And all of you should be looking at the chat as well to see what other people are posting. So thank you again for joining us. I'm looking forward to having a really interesting day, particularly Missy Stoltz, who is talking about a really cutting edge development in Ann Arbor that could be something that other cities could bring forth. And then the final panel of the day, which is around 2 o'clock, is the importance of building coalitions and working with other organizations. And we've got, you got Michigan League of Conservation Voters. We have our students from University of Michigan. We have, of course, Ed Rivet, Michigan Conservative Energy Forum. And then we have Joan Ross, of course, from Detroit. So we got great panels. So at this point, I want to turn it over to Kendall and to give her welcoming comments as well. Thank you, Kendall.
Thanks, John. Good morning and welcome, everyone. I wanted to say thank you to all of you for choosing to spend your Saturday with us during this busy time of year and during a sad and emotional week here in Michigan. I hope all of you are doing well. My name is Kendall Kunman. I'm joining this Zoom call today from Detroit. I work for the Detroit 2030 district, which supports Detroit's building owners and managers in reducing carbon emissions from their buildings and transportation. For the past 3 years, I've served as a board member of GLREA. And during this past year, I've had the honor of serving as board president following Melanie McCoy's leadership the previous 2 years and learning a lot from the incredible people on GLREA's board. Given that the past 2 years have been primarily virtual meetings, I've not had the opportunity to meet all of you in person yet, but I look forward to when we can. GLREA is a leader in Michigan for pushing the renewable energy transition, and we take great pride in our work because we see the impact we are having with the public conversation and shifting how to transition quickly to renewable energy in order to fight climate change and save money on high energy expenditures. So thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to sharing what we've accomplished in 2021 and what we're planning for 2022. At this time, I'd like to thank our sponsors. And I had been planning to read the names of all of our sponsors until I realized just how many we have. So thank you, big thank you. And I'd like to encourage attendees to please take a moment today to view the sponsor logos on the agenda document that John referenced. We are so appreciative of your support for today's meeting and always. And with that, I'll turn it back to John. John, you're on mute.
I apologize. Like I was saying, if you're not speaking, go on mute, but when you are speaking, you should definitely unmute yourself. Okay, well, let's just get started then. We're a little before schedule, but that's great. I'm going to turn it over now to Ken Zabara, who is a GLREA board member and I forget Ken's actual title, Harvest Solar, but he will tell us. Ken, it's over to you.
Hey guys, is my audio okay, John?
Yep, it's great, Ken.
Well, I guess my official title is Director of Commercial Sales for Harvest Solar. I wear a lot of hats there, but I work for Harvest Solar, obviously, and do mostly commercial projects in mostly Michigan, but around the Midwest. And today we're going to talk about essentially where the industry is at today, where it's going, and how GLREA can support that. We've got 4 panelists, and I'm going to start by just having each one introduce themselves and answer one initial question, and we'll go from there. Julie Roth, we'll start with you. Thanks for joining us. Can you give us a little introduction and a general overview of Solarize Ann Arbor?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ken. Thanks everybody, GLREA. It's great to be here. I'm Julie Roth. I'm a senior energy analyst in the Office of Sustainability and Innovations at the City of Ann Arbor, which is a mouthful. But as part of that, one of the main things that I'm doing there is running the Ann Arbor Solarize program. And what this is, many people have heard of the concept of Solarize, which is kind of a group buy amalgamation of, multiple homes going solar. Usually group buys, Solarize type programs are done with RFPs, bid out, and solar installers selected. But the program in Ann Arbor is very different. What we've done is developed sort of what I call a distributed Solarize program, like distributed generation, where individuals in the community work with the solar installer of their choosing and invite neighbors, friends, colleagues, church groups, their community to a meeting to learn about solar and enter into a group buy where we've pre-negotiated tiered discounts based on volume. So it's been wildly successful, based primarily, I think, on sort of the social science of how things go viral and how communities influence one another and community building. And we have gotten, I think, 2.3 megawatts of solar up through the program in the past 2 years. Saved residents around $1 million on the upfront cost of solar so far, and over 12 million, I think, if you look at the 25-year cost of savings that they're going to earn over that period of time. So it's been wildly fun, really successful. Lots of people on this call are installers that have worked on Solarize groups, and I'm happy to be here and share what we've learned.
Awesome, thank you. Pat O'Boyle, thanks for coming out of your tree stand or out of the river or wherever you were to join us today. Give us a brief introduction and tell us what Michigan Saves has been up to as far as your latest offerings and any feedback you're getting from installers or contractors lately.
Well, thanks for inviting me to speak here today. And I did have to take a day off the river, I'll admit it. But so Michigan Saves, nonprofit green bank. I see a bunch of our contractors and our partner organizations, which a huge thanks goes out to them. We've been growing quite a bit the last few years, and it's definitely directly related to our partners, Ann Arbor, City of Holland, Traverse City. Our lenders have really been stepping up lately. I typically work with the contractors, but have been spending a lot more time on the business development side as we've grown. I pulled numbers yesterday. We passed $340 million in energy efficiency and renewable energy improvements in the state of Michigan as of October 31st. We have just over 1,000 residential solar projects that have been installed, and it's growing basically exponentially. And battery storage, which is something that John Freeman and I talked about yesterday. Coming into 2021, we had about 25 installed residential solar battery projects or battery projects in relation to solar. As of yesterday, we are just under 90. So in the last 11 months, we've seen almost a threefold increase from a 10-year history to that. Looking at geothermal, just to make sure Al Waller is satisfied. We've done roughly just under 1,000 geothermal jobs in over the course of Michigan Save's history. The lenders have stepped up. We now are offering a 25-year term up to $100,000 for solar and battery storage projects, which 3 years ago, our longest term was 10 years and our highest dollar figure was about $40,000. So our residential lenders have just been outstanding partners to help residents in the state of Michigan with these projects. So I'll stay on. Hopefully we'll have questions that come up, and my internet is terrible here, so I'll go off video quite a bit, but I will certainly be here.
Sweet, thanks, Pat. John Freeman, our executive director at GLREA, give us you've already kind of, we all mostly or all know you already, but give us a little bit of a background on what GLREA is doing for the industry, I guess. I made a comment earlier to you about how I personally like, what I like about GLREA personally is kind of the fact that we focus a lot on the actual end user, the solar user, as opposed to just contractors and developers and installers. And maybe that plays into your answer or maybe not, but talk to us a little bit about how GLREA can help the industry and what we're doing to get more members.
Well, thank you, Ken. And again, thanks everybody for joining us today. I mean, GLREA is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, which primarily engages in education, where we try and educate both individuals as well as business farmers, about the benefits of incorporating renewable energy and particularly going solar. We have ventured into policy development through the Michigan Public Service Commission, as well as the legislature, because, anytime there is a new effort being done throughout a society, that the policy framework that's established can have a huge impact on it. And frankly, the framework that we've been operating stems from 2008 with Public Act 295, which was enacted when Jennifer Granholm, the current Secretary of Department of Energy, when she was governor of the state of Michigan. We're still operating under many of the parts of that law, Public Act 295. The 1% cap, it goes back to that. The initial enactment of net metering goes back to 2008. And then this act was amended and updated, if you want to call it that, in 2016, where we transitioned from net metering to distributive generation tariff. And yet they did not address the 1% cap back in 2016. And so today, GLREA is doing a combination. We continue to do education, but we also continue to do advocacy work within the legal amount that we're entitled to from the IRS rules, with both the Public Service Commission as well as the legislature. But to specifically address Ken's point about the end user, one of the main reasons I wanted Julie Roth today is because we think her Solarize program that she and Missy Stoltz have pioneered in Ann Arbor is something that we can broaden throughout the state, because we want to continue educating individuals and families and business about solar. And we think the model that Ann Arbor put together really makes a lot of sense, where again, it's a form of relational organizing where we ask solar enthusiasts to invite their friends and family or professional colleagues to these local meetings where we explain solar, and then we have a solar installer there to explain the process from which to get solar. And we just think that is a really smart approach to developing more people to be interested in solar, as well as getting clients for our business members. But the bottom line, though, is that we want to grow this organization because we want to have more capacity to be able to do more work simultaneously. And that is why, we really are encouraging a growth in membership, because the members are the backbone of this organization. I mean, they provide the membership dues to help pay the bills and pay staff. And they also provide a tremendous amount of volunteer hours to help us be able to do work as well. And so we want to continue that in 2022. We're currently up to about 410 members, which is probably double our membership from literally a year or so ago. And that speaks loudly to the interest in solar, and also speaks to the work we've done to reach out to build a membership. But we want to continue this expansion in 2022. And that's why I sent out that memo about relational organizing in terms of signing up new members. And we will go back to this point in early 22. We'll probably have a solar story specifically targeted toward helping members, to asking members who are willing to help get more members to talk about how that can be done. We will provide a toolkit for people who are willing to do that information and so on. So that is, in Canada, kind of a short summary of the work that GLRA is doing and what I'm trying to promote as well as executive director. Back to you, Ken.
Thank you. Julie Staveland is our final panelist from Eagle. Julie, I don't think we've ever talked or met, so thank you very much for joining us here. And if you could please give us a little introduction and talk about what Eagle and or the state are doing to promote renewable energy.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. And I actually have slides. Sorry if that's going to geek it out a little bit. I don't know if I can go ahead and share those now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, sweet.
Do I need to do anything so she can share?
Nope, it's loading right now. So give me
Great.
1 second. Let me know when you can see my slides.
There they are.
Good to go.
All right, so thanks everybody. As Ken said, my name is Julie Staveland. I am the current manager of the sustainability section within the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy. I always like to give a little bit of personal information just because it makes me more relatable and it's fun. So I'm born and raised here in Michigan, but after high school, I was like, peace out Michigan, I'm going to the last frontier. And I moved to Alaska, where I went to college and got my master's in public administration. Met my husband. I've got 4 beautiful children, super passionate about the outdoors and the environment. And when it was time to come back to Michigan for family reasons, I knew that I wanted to pursue something that I felt would be more meaningful for my career. So I joined the Michigan Energy Office. And then when Governor Gretchen Whitmer was elected, she transitioned different offices together. And the Michigan Energy Office joined the newly created Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, and joined the sustainability section. So one of the units that I oversee is energy services, which is going to be relevant to what we're talking about today. Who's the designated state energy office? We've got federal and state funding, but our primary goal is to help communities, through economic growth and environmental sustainability, primarily through energy efficiency and renewable energy programs. So how are we as the state helping communities pursue renewable energy? we have several different grant programs that we have to try and do this. And the main goal is to lead by example. So we target communities throughout the state, our local governments and tribes, and we have the Community Energy Management Program. And this program is designed to meet communities wherever they're at on the energy management spectrum. So if it's at the very beginning in terms of benchmarking and energy audit, or jumping in and doing energy efficiency upgrades, but the ultimate goal is to get them so that they're as efficient as possible so that they can then install renewable energy on their municipal facilities and show their residents that it is possible and the savings that they can achieve through that, and then reinvest those dollars in the community. So we've done multiple projects throughout the state. We actually just opened that grant up, I want to say last week, it might have been the week before, I don't know, Thanksgiving's kind of a blur for me now. You know, so if communities are interested, you know, you can definitely, you know, reach out and participate in this program now. We also wanted to tackle low-income access to clean energy. And so in 2017, we participated in a Department of Energy Accelerator, which is the Clean Energy for Low-Income Community Accelerator that DOE put on. And we participated in that with the Cherryland Electric Cooperative up in the Northwest Territory of the Lower Peninsula. And that looked at identifying 50 families within their area, providing weatherization services to those families, and then giving them access and subscription to renewable energy credits. And we thought it was such a great model. We wanted to pursue that and see what those models might look like in the different utility models that we have in the state. So the second phase we did was in the village of Lawns, which is a municipal utility that signed up 25 homes, and those 25 homes received the weatherization assistance, but then they also purchased, we provided funding to have them purchase part of the community solar panels that the village of Lawns put on. And then the third phase that we just kicked off this year is looking at investor-owned utility with Consumers Energy in the Lansing area. And that's just getting kicked off, which again will provide weatherization for the residents and then access to those renewable energy subscriptions that they might not normally have access to. Wrapping this up, we want to look at these three models because we do have different utility models throughout the state and provide essentially a guidebook for communities that are interested in creating a low-income community access to renewable energy for their residents. So this has been kind of an exciting program that we've seen, and we've tweaked it a little bit each time to refine it, and we've done some assessments in terms of surveying the residents before and after they've received the weatherization, and what they've done once they have those credits from renewable energy on their utility bill. They're actually able to save money and then, you know, pay for groceries or stay on time with their utility bills. And so we've seen some really positive impacts on this one. And then we also have a grant with the University of Michigan that focuses on energy policy and planning. And the big thing here is what we had them do is curate a database that's online and free for community governments and anybody who's interested in looking at it, to see who is zoned for renewable energy within the state, whether it was wind or solar, or if there was mention of EV, and that's also for commercial or residential. And so we did a whole map. And so as you can see, you know, there's obviously the different zoning levels, whether it's county or local, or if it's unzoned, or there wasn't any data available. And then whether or not that mentioned renewable energy. We didn't indicate whether it was pro or against, we just wanted to know if it mentioned it. And this is useful for communities that want to see maybe they don't have something and they want to look at a community that does, so they want to update their zoning policies, or a developer that's looking to go in and they can be like, okay, these communities have already zoned for this, let's go look and see what they've got. And so what we've actually seen is since this zoning database came out, and that was in, it was released, I want to say in fall of 2019, early 2020, we've actually seen an increase of 47% of communities that have actually included solar zoning and 8% increase in wind zoning. So that's a great improvement that we've seen within the state. But we still have 25% that are silent on renewables. And this is a challenge because when we're trying to install renewable energy, these wind and solar installations, if there's no mention of zoning, that's a whole nother hurdle that adds a delay into getting these products rolled out. And so we're working on focusing on providing some of that education and outreach to communities on how they can incorporate that. What are some of the best practices? And then we've got a grant that's helping manage that through the Department of Energy and the Solar Energy Technology Office. And so with this grant with U of M, we've also developed a ton of online resources. Again, we're gearing towards communities because communities can lead by examples and help our residents see the benefits of renewable energy. So there's all kinds of FAQs, there's national resources that are available. We actually just released earlier this year in partnership with MSU, a planning and zoning for solar systems, and it's a guide that provides some templates on what communities can do to update their planning and zoning ordinances to be open to solar development. So that's available online too, and I can provide the link for that here as soon as I'm done. And again, as I said, there's FAQs, that looks at some of the pros of looking at renewable energy and some case studies of solar systems within the state that have been installed. And these are written, not only just from U of M, but MSU and various graduate students as well. And then as part of that grant, we also developed a webinar series, which is Clean Energy and Energy Management. And Julie Roth will know, she was one of our presenters. Specifically for solar, we had helping facilitate rooftop solar in your community, which brought in the Solarize program within the city of Ann Arbor. So if you want to see that it's recorded, we've got that available. But also looking for communities, a broad overview on planning and zoning for wind and solar, and then a deep dive into utility scale for both wind and solar, so that, it can kind of walk communities through, things that they need to think about when they're trying to update their zoning ordinances to be open to these developments.
Aaron Maxwell.
And then on the other side, we're also looking at roadmaps because it's not just residents that need to install solar, right? We need to look at storage and what's that going to look like for the state. We need to look at building up the capacity for the value chain of these renewable energy products, right? Who's building these wind turbines? Who's building these solar panels? And how can we bring that economic development to Michigan and support that so that we have that capacity to grow those areas? And then also on a side note, we're also looking at pairing renewable energy, solar and storage with EV chargers so that it doesn't have to be such a huge impact to the grid, but we can support those EV chargers throughout the state as well. And then we also partnered with SolSmart, which is a Department of Energy organization, to essentially provide assistance to communities to help them understand how they need to update their permitting process so it's easier for us residents to install solar on our residential property. And that's available, and they provide technical assistance for communities throughout the state. And then the other program that we've got is the Catalyst Communities, which looks at a broad range of areas within a local government's control, but things that they're kind of interconnected in terms of decarbonization and climate change. And essentially what it is trying to do is connecting communities together so that they can leverage their voices louder to our legislature to help enact the change that we want, like addressing that 1% cap. And so, sorry, that was I don't know if I took too long, John, sorry. But let me know if you have any questions, and I'm happy to be here.
That's fantastic. I really appreciate and like the fact that it looks like you're really focusing on the energy management and the planning and zoning side to where it'll really result in the most efficient implementation. And you're not we're not just promoting throwing solar panels everywhere at every building,
Right.
and every cornfield.
Yep.
It's a strategic, efficient way to do things. I like that. Thank you.
Yep.
Oh, Boyle, I would like to get your general take on the industry, because you have a very broad view of the industry. You talk to both the homeowners and contractors, residential and commercial, every energy related business in the state. And I'd like to get your general vibe. What are people saying around the water cooler? And, are you seeing a shift in, maybe a certain part of the industry or a new product or offering that is more common, maybe something that surprises you? With your broad view, can you give us a little, background on what people are saying in the industry?
Yeah, and for those of you that know me, I'm relatively new to this industry. As of 4 years ago now, I came from a business background to clean energy and the financing side of things, and people are more active. I feel like, be it business or residential, and I focused a lot on the residential side, is people are more willing to do improvements to their home, be it renewable or just energy efficiency measures. And it's likely because of exactly what we're all doing here today. We would like to be in person, but here we are in our houses or our offices or wherever we are. So, and with the housing market of where it's at, depending on where you live in Michigan, it's obviously more than other places. it's a great time to sell your house, but it's a really hard time to buy a house. So the improvements that you were thinking about doing, those new windows, or now your solar panels that you've been considering for years, like, well, I'm probably going to be here for the next X period. The battery storage is something that it's astonishing to me, and it's probably directly tied to the policy or the rates with DT and consumers. But I don't think we've had any single segment of our business grow where, I mean, threefold in 10 months from a program that's been here for 10 years feels like a supply and demand issue about to come down the pipeline. That's coming, and hopefully the production side of things can keep up with it, and we can grow. Like I said, I can't support our contractors and our lenders enough. Like that's who's really doing this work. We're here to help, but that's who's out in the field doing it. So I think that's a quick way to explain just what we're seeing. Businesses is the same way, where they're finally reinvesting. If they made it through this, they're reinvesting to try and make improvements. So I hope that's a bit of a
Yep. So the battery, I knew, I assumed and knew that obviously you're seeing more battery projects, but to know that it's 3 times in 10 months, that's crazy.
And honestly, until Todd Parker from my team pulled the numbers yesterday, I would have got that number wrong.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting to think about too, because it's kind of a bittersweet thing with the utilities and updated DG policies where, it has spurred that. And that's just gonna, there are benefits to, a silver lining to the less attractive policies in that, you're doing more Michigan Saves loans. It's gonna improve the battery R&D and battery technology. And so that's good to see. Julie Roth, Solarize Ann Arbor, I have over the past, 7, 8, 9 years, I have kind of politely given constructive criticism and haven't been a huge fan of Solarize programs in general. 5, 6, 7 years ago, you guys have clearly, obviously, sorry for the baby noise. So you guys have clearly made this very successful. Can you touch on a couple things that have made it more successful and that have made it more successful, and also explain to me how a homeowner gets involved? Are there deadlines, or is it constantly ongoing, and how do they get the ball rolling with that?
Yeah, sure can. And way to multitask.
I know. And
Yeah.
luckily I have, it's nice having the out, we're on a Zoom call on a Saturday morning. What do you want me to tell you?
Right. Your problem, you take care of it. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. I think
And
none of
Julie,
us.
if you want to put up some slides,
Oh yeah, sure. I can do that. I have a couple slides that I can share. Hang on a second. Let me pull them up.
And while we're waiting, I just want to acknowledge Katie McMahon's help in putting together the model for GLREA as well. She was wonderful over the summer. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to mention that. So, so just like in terms of, I'll tell you about outcomes, and then I'll tell you about why I think it works so well. So I kind of mentioned some of this, but we've gotten over 2.3 megawatts of new solar committed throughout our community, and we're open to anybody in Washtenaw County. So in terms of tracking this, it doesn't track exactly with Ann Arbor Solar because we're open to folks in Washtenaw County to join in. We only put a circle around Washtenaw County simply because of capacity and trying to create some geographic compactness for the installers. And then folks in Ann Arbor, some go solar, sometimes not through Solarize. So the numbers don't exactly track, but they're pretty close. That represents well over 300 roofs. And I think I mentioned about $1 million in savings. We do track price per watt within the program. And the program has sort of pre-negotiated these discounts up to 15%. And most groups do achieve that 15% off based on 10 or more individuals moving forward in that group. So our price per watt does represent at least a solid 15% off of the average $3 per watt in Michigan. So we are saving the numbers look real. And we're seeing on average, about 48 people sign up for every group buy. This continues to blow my mind. And I continue to wait until like we're just hitting some sort of capacity or ceiling of not even early adopters at this point. It's sort of the middle, right? But it keeps happening. So we just keep doing it and we'll keep doing it as long as it keeps happening. So essentially the way it works and the reason I think it's so successful is you have an individual in the community who is either going solar or has already gone solar, who's really enthusiastic about it. And they have a network of people that they know. The city can do outreach, right? We can sort of promote our programs and talk about what we're doing at the city to facilitate green energy, but we're going to hit echo chamber within maybe 2 or 3 times. We only reach the same people over and over again. But Joe, who is going solar and is really excited about it and loves his installer, he knows a completely different network of people. So I picture this kind of like a Venn diagram of all of Washtenaw County where, we get one person who has a different outreach, and then maybe someone from that group buy gets really excited and hosts the next group buy, and they have a different network of people. So it just keeps going. It would be nice if things are in person. I think there's positives and negatives to in person and Zoom. In Zoom, we can get a lot of people there without, with greater ease, right? People don't have to find childcare and they don't have to travel across town and they don't, all of that kind of thing. But, it's not in person. We don't have snacks, which is sort of sad. But anyway, but I think that that outreach and that safety in numbers. So whereas you may have a person who's noticed a few solar arrays that have gone up around them and they're kind of curious about it, but they're not at a point where they're going to just pick up the phone and call an installer who's going to come into their house and try to sell them something. That feels intimidating. That feels like they're not ready to take that step. But to just come to a meeting and learn about solar and hear from your neighbor or your friend or your colleague who's done it or doing it and get all your questions answered, and we do a big presentation, that feels safe. And then you get to see your neighbors and your basically community members asking questions and investigating it, which again increases the safety of and then normalizes the process. So essentially we end up getting about 48 people on average signing up for a group, about 36 on average estimate requests in each group, and about 15 sales out of each group. This is averages. So it's almost half of the people who request estimates that end up moving forward with that installer. There's probably another percentage who come, learn, get estimates, and choose a different installer. So we're not even tracking that. This is a graph of what that's looked like in Ann Arbor. So as you can see, I think on average, we were looking at about 20 permits per year for a long time. 2019 was supposed to be a giant year, and it was a giant year if you take away these two, because that's the year that in Ann Arbor, we lost net metering with DTE. So anyone who was waiting and thinking about solar jumped on in 2019. We started the Solarize program in the last quarter of 2019, right after net metering was done, by coincidence, not intentionally. So about 12 of those installs from 2019 are Solarize installs right here. But we expected 2020 to go back down, that we had gotten all those people that were already thinking about it. But instead of going back down, this is what happened in 2020 in terms of numbers of installs in Ann Arbor. And here we are in 2021. And 2021 is almost done, but not quite. So that's quite an adoption curve. And I don't know that it's all due to Solarize, but a lot of it, because I know most of those installs are through Solarize or someone who had come to a Solarize meeting. There have been other policies that have definitely helped, like the state legislature changing the rule around increasing your property taxes when you get solar. That definitely helped move the needle as well. Oh, and this is what I think John or somebody was talking about. So the success of this is thrilling, and it keeps me going and is what I wake up for every morning, is because it just feels like we're really increasing our impact. But it's only so useful if we can only do it in Washtenaw County. So I made a toolkit. Our office created this toolkit. It's in a Google Drive, and it has everything that we've created. So installer outreach and onboarding, customer outreach, the tracker kind of spreadsheets that we use, because I continue to meet with the installers once a week after a group buy, in order to kind of keep things moving along and help them track all of these people, because it's sort of it can be a bear. And we want to make sure people are getting good customer service. So I'm acting as sort of an administrative helper to the installers for the next 2 months as the group buy goes. It's usually a 2-month window. Anyway, I've created a toolkit. It is widely available. All of the tools are downloadable for anybody who wants to use them. And GLREA really liked this toolkit. And I'm so thrilled with our partnerships with GLREA and Michigan Saves, but GLREA took the toolkit and rebranded it so it was a little bit less Ann Arbor centric and made it sort of more generalized. And they made both, I think, a PDF form of it as well as a Google Drive form of it. And all of these are open to anybody. And if you're interested in starting a program, or you want your city to start a program, or the renewable energy advocacy group in your city to start a program, the GLREA is handholding people and helping them basically initiate this in their own cities. So it's really exciting, and that's where the partnerships can be really powerful. At the risk of going on too long, I just wanted to mention one other amazing partnership and program that's going on that has to do with solar, and that is our partnership with Michigan Saves. So one of the barriers that we see here in Ann Arbor around renewables in general and electrifying everything is that homeowners who want to move in this direction are pretty overwhelmed pretty quickly with the amount of just information and how do I move forward and who do I talk to? And the contractors that come into our homes are people who we trust, right? Or, they're trusted voices. And so when we have a contractor, let's say our HVAC contractor who comes into our home and says, oh, solar doesn't work in Michigan, it's too cloudy, don't do that. That's not good. When we have a energy auditor come into our home and actually say, oh, you know what, electrifying your furnace isn't really good because it just moves the smokestack from one place to another, which isn't true. These are problems. So we've been working with Michigan Saves on developing a contractor training program, and Mac McCabe at Michigan Saves has been our point person on that. We worked with the Minnesota CEE, and they've done some contractor training, especially around heat pumps and HVAC. And so they gave us their modules. We took them, we retooled them to be Michigan specific. We added some content regarding all of this, with the goal that's going to be rolled out with, I think, this month, of a contractor training program for solar installers, HVAC installers, energy auditors, electricians, and plumbers to receive what's called an electrification badge, which means you've gone through the 5 modules, you've taken tests with each, and you can at least speak intelligently about all the other trades and renewable energy, so that homeowners can go to Michigan Saves and search for an electrificated, that's a new word, an electrification badged installers and contractors, so that they have some way of knowing who to call when they're interested in doing these things in this space. So I'm sorry, I'm talking for a long time, but I have a lot to say. So I'll stop. I hope that answered your questions.
Don't be sorry. That was awesome information. Those statistics are incredible. 15 actual projects out of 48 people per group. Roughly how many groups have you had or how many meetings have been held? 5
Yeah.
or 10 or 500?
Somewhere around 25, something like that.
Awesome.
Yeah. Mhm.
That spike in 2021 is incredible, given the, a significant step backwards in policy.
I know.
Good
I
for
know.
you.
It's tremendous.
And GLREA right now is working to set up Solarize program in Royal Oak. We've had one meeting already. We're working in Livonia with Father Charles Morris to set up a Solarize program there. And then John Gourlay is working to set up Solarize in Chelsea. So we want to try and export this around the state. One of my goals in 2022 is to raise enough money in order to hire a full-time staffer that could really drive this program throughout the state of Michigan. So.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Julie. Julie Stablen, is the state or Eagle doing anything as far as actual implementation? Are there projects that are actually being implemented that you're able to speak to?
So from this, like the big state perspective, I'm not actually involved in that. So the Energy Office focuses on the state and federal funding that we get targeting towards businesses and communities. So in terms of actual deployments, we do provide funding to Michigan businesses and Michigan communities that are ready to install solar. But looking at a bigger picture, the governor does have a task force that's looking at solar and renewable energy deployments on state facilities. So they are looking into that, as well as siting on DNR land. And then there is the whole climate council that's looking at developing a My Healthy Climate plan. And part of that is the electrification and looking into renewable energy and having that accessible. So that should be rolling out. I think their draft plan is supposed to be coming out sometime in January, February, and then starting, implementation projects coming later this in 2022. So we're looking into it. No, nothing definite has been happening, but we do know, that from the state perspective, we do want to be leaders, for our communities and for our residents. So there are some solar installations on some of our facilities, and we're looking at increasing that number.
I apologize for this. So I've got a follow-up question, and I apologize if it's more a question for the Energy Office or somebody else. So I won't be offended if you say I just don't know. But can you speak at all to the state is going to have does have environmental goals, and obviously needs to be concerned with cost effectiveness. Can you speak at all to kind of where the state or how the state decides where that line should be drawn on cost effectiveness versus environmental impact? That's
way over my head, Ken. I don't have that answer.
Okay,
Yeah, so
no problem.
that's going to be decided at a much higher level with directors and things like that. But I know that they do look at that information.
Yep.
So sorry.
No problem. No problem. I did actually, for John Freeman, I wanted to kind of continue what you were talking about with Solarize on as far as that and other examples. Can you give us some examples of how GLREA is kind of expanding the industry? How can GLREA expand things like Solarize and benefit the industry? And how can the people on this call help that cause and help our membership?
One of the big goals for GLREA in 2022 is to get a lot more membership participation on various volunteer activities. I've mentioned membership recruitment, but that's just one of them. We also want to get active members to help promote the Solarize program based upon Julie's analysis that if you can find an enthusiastic solar person who wants to spread the gospel, that they have a network of people that they can invite to a Zoom meeting right now to talk about solar, and then we can get a solar installer to talk about the process from which to get solar. And the whole goal, of course, based upon Julie's work, is to demystify the process and to educate people about the benefits and how people can save money on their energy expenditures while also helping to fight climate change and to address global warming. And so our goal is to promote this program, the Solarize program, actively in 2022, and to get members who are willing to organize meetings within their local communities. And then, of course, we, GLREA, will help them, as Julie put it, hold their hand every step of the way. And that's what I drove out to Livonia with Father Charles Morris, and we sat down with the local sustainability commission, the Greenleaf Commission in Livonia, where we talked about the Solarize program. And then they had a couple of officials from the Livonia Department of Public Works, because we needed to educate the city about what we're trying to do as well, to get them to buy in. Because the great thing about Ann Arbor is that the city of Ann Arbor is fully behind the effort to promote solar within the community. And so they can use their website, they can use their own email network to help advertise this program. And so we want to try and duplicate that within Livonia as well as Royal Oak. At the Royal Oak meeting we did, which was in person, we held it at the Senior Center in Royal Oak. And again, the sustainability director from Royal Oak came out to join us at the meeting and to talk about, their involvement. So we think that we've got a great model that Julie has pioneered. And then we are trying to, promote it throughout the state. And so, we did hold one solar story. Well, actually, we had two solar stories. One where Julie first talked about the model back, I think it was last May. And then we did a follow-up meeting, I think it was in July or August, when we kind of polished the model. And so we're going to be promoting this again in 2022, probably in the first quarter. And then any member that would be interested in trying to help put together a meeting within the local community, just let us know, and we'll work with them to help put this forward and everything. So I guess the other thing I want to mention is that GLREA also partners with other organizations on various activities. For the last 3 years, we have helped put together what we call net zero energy events, where we want to educate people, homeowners and business, about how they can take steps to really insulate their homes through various new technological techniques. And in some cases, if people are building a new home, as a part of the design of the new home, to really make it so that people lose very little energy, heat energy in particular, with their homes. And so with that, and then with the addition of solar, a lot of these homes and buildings can become almost completely energy independent. The solar or the geothermal system generates the heat or electricity. And then because the home has taken further steps to be so well insulated that they don't lose very much energy at all. So you can literally become net zero. And so we're going to continue doing these programs in 2022. We've partnered with the Green Home Institute out of Grand Rapids with Brett Little. We partner with the Michigan Energy Contractors Association, MECA, that's run by David Gard. And also Larry Kaufman of the Michigan Geothermal Association. So we're going to continue those types of education events. But the one thing we're trying to do in 2022 is to try and work with local units of government to help expand these kind of net zero events. Because we need to, every time we come up with a concept, we need to be thinking in terms of bringing it to scale. We need to increase the size and the impact of these programs, because we need to hit more and more people so that more people can benefit from these programs. And that's what the beauty of Julie's program is, that this kind of relational organizing, where it's almost like a chain reaction of interest from one group to the next group, makes sense and helps to promote it to scale. And working with local units of government is another example of how we can take a model and bring it to scale by getting more and more communities, because there are lots of communities in Michigan now that are really jumping on this bandwagon of becoming sustainable, promoting energy efficiency, promoting solar, and helping to fight climate change. And so if we can get the Grand Rapids and the Hollands and the Traverse Cities and the Ann Arbors and Livonias and Royal Oak to promote these types of programs, we think we can take it to scale. And the other interesting development, and I'll finish with this, is that there are a number of local units of government, including counties, that are going to be getting a lot of funding from the federal government from the, the infrastructure program. And then if the Build Back Better program ever gets enacted. And so, for instance, I'm having conversations with, the Oakland County Commission about how we can bring to scale these programs throughout Oakland County. And I've brought Patrick O'Boyle into these conversations as well. And so we think that there will be other counties that would be interested, and cities that might be interested in helping to, spend some of the federal dollars to promoting these programs for educational activities. So that's another kind of effort we're going to be working on in 2022. And I'll stop there.
John, can I jump in? That's
Of course.
great. And in terms of, it's really interesting thinking about the federal money that could be coming to cities and how to spend it. Having a point person to run Solarize programs in these cities is a relatively inexpensive way to leverage some of those funds. So, and I am more than happy to work with anybody who is interested in sort of becoming a little, Julie somewhere and piloting this program in a more robust way. Like you can pilot this program just if you're just anybody, anyone who wants to run a Solarize group in their community can do so. And that's what GLREA is happening. But if there are cities or municipalities or communities that want to do a bigger go at it, I am more than happy to be a resource or point person or mentor.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you very much. And I haven't had this conversation with Katie yet, but I'm interested in what Katie's plans are down the road when she graduates from University of Michigan. So, but we'll save that for another time. I'm not going to put her on the spot.
Don, could I jump in just for a second? I'm on the Ann Arbor Energy Commission, and Julie actually was a volunteer with the city for a long time before she was brought on full time and actually paid for the work. So, I think the community is looking at this. Funding and stuff would be great, but that you can build to this. It would be wonderful if the Michigan Energy Office provided grants for Solarize programs, but in the meantime, not having funding to pay for Julie shouldn't to a community. So she can explain how we can organize that as a volunteer activity as well. So, thanks.
Yeah, I was volunteering until it became clear that I couldn't also keep my other job. And it was growing so exponentially here. And my passion was clearly here. So it's rolled into a completely different scale.
Back to
Thank you,
Ken.
everyone. And the scalability and expanding all that stuff, as I'm seeing in the chat too, we need to expand that into schools, not just geographically, but into different industries and different angles. John Freeman, do you want to try to do a couple questions or move to Tyler?
Yeah, let's do a couple quick questions or comments. And
okay, and real quick, there's just one. There's a 248 number. If you could mute, that was all. So what was that, John?
no, go ahead. Let's take a couple questions, quick ones.
Okay. Anybody either want to chat or put it in the chat or speak up?
I am interested in knowing whether or not there are really enough installers in Michigan, because what I was hearing is that the smaller local installer in my part of Michigan, I live in Benzie County, he's working all over the state and he only has about 20 people. And he's also working in Indiana. I mean, it doesn't make sense. I think there might be need for a lot more installers, or am I all wrong on that?
Probably everybody's got a different take on that. I don't know. Anybody want to comment on that?
Well, I'll just make a quick comment. I think that there are a number of great solar installers in the state of Michigan, and many of them, if not most of them, are members of GLREA. So I think it's we can pretty much guarantee that if anyone is seriously interested in getting solar, we can find a solar installer that will be willing to service that individual no matter where they live. And I occasionally do get calls from people interested in solar. And so I always send them 3 local installers within their geographical area. The second part of my answer, though, is that part of the problem, Marcia, is that we need to have a solid policy framework that supports the expansion of renewable energy in Michigan. The fact that we've got this 1% cap, which legally limits the number of solar installations that utilities are required to connect to the grid, frankly, acts as a prohibitive factor in attracting even more people to go into business, indigenous Michigan people to go into the solar business, or to hire more people, or for that matter, out-of-state solar companies coming to Michigan. And so again, we need to get rid of this 1% cap. We need to enact a community solar law that will encourage people that live in apartments or condominiums or whose roofs don't face south. By having a community solar statute, we can attract more developers. So this is that's my answer. And so I'll stop there.
And can I jump in on that too? One of the things we found out with the Solarize program in Ann Arbor was that the cost of sales for small small businesses is fairly high. And that one of the things that governments can actually do that's very appropriate is to find people who are interested in solar and bring them to the table so that the solar companies don't need to go find them. They're more than happy to pass that discount, which is their savings on solar, more than happy to pass that discount on. So as John has said, we need state action. I would say if you're having trouble finding solar installers in your community, you need to talk to your local government about putting together a Solarize program because it is a magnet. I don't think that Ann Arbor has trouble finding solar installers. In fact, there are out-of-state companies that are now looking at Ann Arbor and looking at Michigan as a hotspot for solar activity because of this ability to channel pre-qualified and educated customers into solar businesses, allowing them to lower their costs and pass those savings on. So it's a win-win across the board.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely not a shortage of installers, but the more there are, the more it's going to drive competition and pricing and technology, and it'll be healthy for everyone. Thomas Morton, have you got a question, Thomas? I see your hand raised.
Hi, yes. Hi, sorry. Yes, the wife, actually.
Okay,
I just
sorry.
had a quick, no problem. I just had a quick question on that 1% cap, because we are in the process of getting quotes, and we're probably maybe moving along even a little bit faster than we would otherwise, except for the terror of the 1% cap thing. And so I just wanted to ask, it's kind of a quick question, but at what stage, when you're getting quotes, at what stage are you in? In other words, you've made it in under the 1% cap, and at what stage could you possibly, have plunked down all the money and then found out, oh, too bad, you missed it?
I can answer that question. Basically, once you've contracted your solar installer and they apply for the interconnection, at that point you're in. So very early on, you should make sure your solar installer puts in the application for your interconnection.
Was that, you mean once you've signed the contract, you're saying?
Usually that happens right at that time, yes.
Okay, and be sure they've put in what? I'm sorry.
Interconnection agreement.
Okay, thank you.
By the way, just to add to Alyssa's comment, we are a classic case of how Solarize Ann Arbor Solarize works. We are not in Ann Arbor. We're in a rural township west of Ann Arbor. And Alyssa's cousin was in a Ann Arbor Solarize group. We heard about it there. And even though I've been around this stuff for a long, long time, I didn't have an idea of how we could actually move on something like this. This whole thing being exposed to the Solarize group and the discussions And the GLREA activities has brought us back into this whole circle. So I think we're a classic case of how this can work.
Wonderful.
Awesome.
In terms of the caps, as John had said earlier, DTE is probably going to be full by the end of the year. So the MPSC will have to do something about that between now and then, either that or legislatively. And consumers is likely to hit the 2% cap, which they've already expanded to, probably by the end of the year as well.
Okay, Ken.
Yeah, I mean,
We need to move
we're talking a
on.
few weeks.
Yep. Thank you guys very much. Freeman, that's your call. If you want to introduce Tyler or go to the next piece.
Okay, thank you very much. Anand, can you hold off on your question, or is it a quick one, or do you? Okay. Okay, I want to move to the next item on the agenda. We lost a wonderful man this year, Mike Lancia. And so we wanted to put on the agenda in remembrance of Mike. And I want to call upon Tyler Kaniszewski. Help me out, Tyler, if I mispronounce your name, to lead this remembrance of Michael. Tyler is with Innovatus Solar out of Indiana, but they do a lot of work in Michigan as well. It's a great outfit, and Tyler is an amazing individual who is very tight, very close to Mike Lancia. I also want to acknowledge that Roz Lancia is on the call, and I have had the pleasure of working with Mike and Roz for ever since I really started with GLREA. And I went to the celebration of life that Roz organized a month or so ago. And one of the things I shared with everyone that came to that celebration of life, family and friends, was that Mike, when I needed a member to testify in the legislature to give the real life perspective of solar and what the impact of various policies would have on the business, I would call Mike, and he would, more often than not, drop everything and drive to Lansing and testify. And he would do an extraordinary job. And so he will be missed, but I want to turn it over to Tyler to bring this remembrance home. Tyler, go ahead.
Thanks, John. Yeah, hey, everybody. We take this moment to honor the passing of solar entrepreneur and pioneer Michael Gilman Lindsay. He was born on October 11th, 1954 in Grand Rapids, Michigan, to Maxine Eloise DeLong Lindsay and Vincent Lancia. So I'm going to take a few minutes and read a beautiful write-up by Roz and hit Mike and Roz's kids, Jane and John. I couldn't have said it better myself, so I just wanted to go ahead and read this because it gives a good, it does it well. Who Mike was, he truly was an awesome guy. So the characteristics that his family will remember most about Mike are his generosity, intelligence, integrity, humor, love of the environment, and pride of his family, close friends, land, and home. He was truly the most interesting man in the world. A nature lover and protector of the earth, he worked tirelessly on his land, clearing and establishing trails, gathering points for all to enjoy the land, making a stream, or just laying in his hammock. When he walked in the room for a family gathering meeting or into a restaurant, neighborhood gathering, or social event, he was always the guy to greet everyone with a hi or a smile. He was always interested in their stories, looking for ways to better his community and the industry in which he worked. Mike was a veteran of the United States Army who served in the 1970s in Germany. Mike's career of selling began in the 80s, where he first sold wood stoves. He advanced his skill set in the 90s and early 2000s by working in the trucking industry. From there, he eventually founded SolarWinds Power Systems in October of 31st, 2008 with his wife, Roz Lindsay. He successfully became the go-to for renewable energy and advising people on lessening their carbon footprints in Western Michigan. In February of this year, Mike was diagnosed with a lesion on his brainstem and received surgery for its removal. He courageously fought to come back and heal through therapies, but sadly he wasn't able to recover. He was preceded in death by his parents and brother, Ronald Perdue, survived by his wife, Roz Lindsay, daughter, Jane Lindsay, son, Jonathan Lindsay, daughter, Sarah Roddery, his best friend, Aaron Ridley, and Linda, sister, Suzanne Smith, brother, David Lindsay, and Lori, and several in-laws, nieces, and nephews. Memorial contributions can be made to send Mike to space. We raise money. He's going to be part of a space mission next year, where it's through SpaceX. It's called Beyond Burials, where they can actually send ashes to the moon. It's really cool. So some of us are going to be going down there next year. Also, they were raising funds for GLREA or to the Red Cloud Indian Reservation. So I thought that was well said about Mike. He truly was an interesting man and a real close friend of mine, a mentor, and really a fatherly figure. I got to spend a lot of time with Mike on his property or meeting with him in Grand Rapids while I was back in school doing a master's at Grand Valley State, which I learned Mike actually went to Grand Valley State too. So I'm really gonna miss him. He was a true friend and somebody I admired that was making the planet a better place. And gotten through Mike, really gotten to spend a lot of time with Roz, his wife, and become really good friends with his son, John Lindsay, he's had cool jobs working in Yellowstone and other parts of the US. And Jane Lindsay, she also works with SolarWinds. Gotten to know her. So it's been a tough time for the family, and I've been spending a lot of time with them on their property, and just seeing what Mike built and what he was doing, and his spirit will definitely live on through his family and through people like me that were close to Mike. So thanks, John, for letting me talk about Mike, and I can pass it on to whoever's next.
Well, I think we should, I don't know if Roz would like to say a word or two. I don't know if you're interested, but you're welcome to share your thoughts.
Here, I'm unmuted. Thanks for the kind words, Tyler, and everybody that supported us. Much appreciated.
Well, like I said, Roz, you and Mike were very critical early on when I first became executive director to help me. And I told a funny story at the Celebration of Life, which I'll take 30 seconds and tell this story here, that I got invited to go to a Grand Rapids home show. Brett Little invited me. This was like 3 years ago. So I went there, and Mike and Roz had an exhibit set up for SolarWinds. And I didn't really know either one of them at that point. I might have talked on the phone, maybe by email, but Mike was busy, talking to people that were passing by his booth, and Roz took the initiative to talk to me about what she thought GLREA needed to do to be an effective organization. And initially I was taken back by her passion and her energy, but then it became real clear that all of her ideas were spot on. And so then I immediately realized, even while she's lecturing me, about, this is a really smart woman and I got to listen very carefully. Whenever she calls me, I'm immediately going to pick up the phone and talk to her. So it's been a great partnership and a great friendship. And on behalf of GLREA, we're going to miss Mike tremendously. And we'll continue to obviously look forward to working with you and your family as your business carries on. So.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to say too. We're still here. He's, he found it and I found it, but SolarWinds is still involved, and we'd still like to, become a part or keep being a part of it. We had a kind of a tough year last year, but we're here. We're moving forward. We have jobs, we're installing, and keep us in the loop. So thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, at this point now, we're going to turn to our next panel. This is a really important panel. The title of the panel is Understanding Utility Opposition. I put this on the program because this is absolutely important, because most of the really important policies that we've been pushing in the legislature, unfortunately, DTE and consumers have been staunchly opposed to. And there are three in particular I can think of: the 1% bill, community solar so far they're opposed to. And then there was some interesting legislation dropped a couple years ago about supporting microgrids in the state. And once again, there was a hearing on the bill, and the lobbyists for DTE and consumers testified against it. And I personally served in the legislature for 6 years. And so I fully understand the political and economic power that large businesses can have with the legislature. And the utilities are very sophisticated, and we can't underestimate the influence they have with legislators. And unfortunately, with term limits, legislators are not there long enough to fully realize that they don't need to take money from the utilities or other large businesses in order to get reelected. After a while, if you've been representing your community, they're going to vote for you no matter what, because they understand your personal integrity and the fact that you're really representing the community well. But when you're only there for a short period of time, you never establish that sense of security. And so that's why the utilities, I think, in large part, maintain their political influence. But I wanted to really focus on this. And so we have two great speakers. We have Matt Casper, who is with the Energy and Policy Institute. And this is actually, I am jumping ahead, and I apologize. I'm going to turn this over to Melanie McCoy immediately, and she will do the introductions. Melanie, take it away.
Thanks, John. And Tyler and Roz, thanks for that great tribute. It kind of shows how important all of us are to everyone. We're friends, we're family, we develop really close ties for the good of the environment going forward. So thank you. Kind of brought us back down to why we're here, but I'll transition now, as John has, to our utility friends. And I'm going to say I was a general manager of 2 separate municipal utilities, and we do have a challenge as a utility. We want to provide safe, reliable, low-cost electricity to our customers. The benefits that the municipals have, and this is my personal opinion, is that our customers are our owners. And when we're fortunate enough to be in a community that understands how important renewable is, then we can look to renewable energy to provide that for our customers. So it all depends on your owners, I think. And that's where I'll turn it over to Matt Casper and John Richter, 2 awesome speakers. I'll read their bios, but they have been John Richter has been so helpful for you, for the GLREA in all of the cases that have been in front of the Public Service Commission. He catches all kinds of little math errors, and he does great work for us. And we're fortunate to have him together with Matt Casper, and I'll read Matt's. bio and then John's bio. And we're going to have, John is going to talk a little bit about the why utilities have the resistance, and Matt's going to tell us a little bit about the how. So Matt Casper is the Deputy Director at the Energy and Policy Institute. It's a watchdog, a utility watchdog organization. Before joining the Energy and Policy Institute in 2014, Matt was a research assistant for the Energy and Environment Policy team at the Center for American Progress, a nonpartisan policy institute in DC. Matt also was a fellow for Organizing for America in Indiana, where he spent time working in Hartford, Connecticut for the state legislature. A native of Illinois, Matt graduated from Butler University in Indianapolis. He now lives in Illinois, and I hope Butler's not playing a basketball game right now, Matt. And John Richter, I'll just read his bio and then I'm going to turn it over to John. John Richter is a senior policy analyst for the Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association and on the board of directors. He's an expert witness at the Michigan Public Service Commission cases. He's presented to the U.S. Congressional staff on wind energy policy impacts. He has presented renewable energy policy recommendations to Michigan legislature and staff. Mr. Richter taught solar energy at Macomb Community College and has been a regular speaker at the renewable energy conferences for 3 decades. So we got a great panel here, and I'm going to turn it over to John Richter, and hopefully you can share your screen. It worked, John.
There we go. Sorry, I was muted. Okay. So I'm going to talk about why utilities are resisting customer-owned solar, right? They're not opposed to solar in general, but I mean, solar is a great thing. Why would anyone oppose it? Well, they're really just responding to the incentives that the current system has. So I'm going to talk about how utility company profits are regulated, how regulations drive utilities to buy equipment, and how customer solar reduces the utility's opportunity for more profits, and how this has really led to their behavior with regards to net metering and the caps on participation. Now, I'm only going to be talking about regulated investor-owned utilities. Michigan has a lot of municipal utilities and co-ops. They have an entirely different set of rules that govern them, and that's just more than I can get into today. This is the service territories of Michigan utilities. You can see in the eastern Michigan here, we've got DTE's territory up to the thumb. And then this vast yellow area is consumers' energy. Geographically much larger, but actually fewer customers and less electricity sales than DTE, owing to the huge population density and the industry in the eastern part of the state. A little southwestern part of the state here, that's Indiana Michigan Power. They have a lot of territory in Indiana, but a little bit in Michigan. We've got Alpena up here and various parties up in the Upper Peninsula. So if you think about corporations, these are all corporations, and a corporation is a legal entity created to generate profits, and through those profits provide a return to their shareholders, their owners. That's their purpose for existence. Right. In most corporations, profits are increased by increasing revenues or decreasing costs, because profits equal revenue minus costs. But the pricing is set in competition. So there's multiple corporations out there trying to meet the needs of customers. They have to compete for those customers, and that's really how pricing gets set. Regulated monopolies are entirely different. The pricing is not set by competition, it's set by the regulators. Here it's the Michigan Public Service Commission, and that's done in order to achieve a certain amount of revenue and profit for the utility based on what they're spending things on. So their approved profit, they have a certain percentage of profit that they get to make on their rate base, which is the capital they've invested across the years, less depreciation. And so they're strongly incentive to invest in equipment. Meanwhile, all of their operating expenses are part of the revenue requirement. Those get passed right into the formula. Now, I apologize for hitting you with a mathematical formula before noon, but I think it's very instructive. So the revenue requirement that is used to set the rates that we all pay for our electricity is the sum of two factors: the operating costs of the utility, which include their depreciation. So all the wages, salaries, benefits, the taxes they pay, all those things get passed in as operating costs. And then their rate of return, which is set by the regulators, it's a percentage, times, this is their rate base, right? All the capital that they've invested across the years minus all the depreciation on that capital. And I'll get an example in a minute to show you. This creates some sort of, economists would say, perverse incentives. So in corporations that I worked in my career, we were pressed every year to do more with less, cut costs everywhere you can, right? In a public utility, all of the operating costs are routinely passed through to ratepayers. So the incentive to economize is pretty limited. Conversely, they make more profit by investing more capital. So as long as the MPSC approves the investment as reasonable and prudent, and that's what these cases are all about, it generally doesn't matter if the investment pays off. If it turns out after the fact to have been a really bad idea, it doesn't really change anything. Whereas in a for-profit corporation, heads roll if capital is distributed badly or vested badly. Now here's an example. Suppose an investor-owned utility invests $100 million in a new piece of equipment. It doesn't matter what the equipment is, right? But let's say it lasts 20 years and different equipment is different lifetimes, and that their authorized rate of return is 10%, which is a little high, but it makes the math easy here. So in year one, they get a 10% profit on the 100 million. That's a $10 million profit. In year two, that equipment has depreciated by 5%. Right? Over 20 years, that'll be total depreciation. And so that equipment is now worth $95 million on the books, if you will. They get a 10% profit on that. That's $9.5 million. Year three, it's had another year of depreciation. It's worth $90 million. So they get a $9 million profit, and so on and so forth, right? But the point here is that the profit that they make is directly proportional to the amount of capital they invest. So they make profits by investing capital, whether it's in power generation, in distribution systems. And the power generation is sized for peak demand, right? That hottest summer day when all the air conditioners are running, plus a reserve factor. They put in an excess amount of capacity by regulation in case a plant is down, right? Not all power plants can operate on any given day. In addition to building new generation, they might retire some plants and need to replace it. And the distribution systems require constant maintenance and investment. They're also sized for peak demand, right? The wires have to be big enough to get the maximum power to everybody that wants it. They may get replaced or upgraded for reliability, or you may see expansions because new territory, right? New subdivisions are built, new shopping malls, new office buildings, whatever. They all need distribution power infrastructure. But the point here, these systems are all sized for peak demand. So peak demand creates more opportunity for profit increasing investment in equipment. So let's take a hypothetical example. What if across the state, Michigan demand, electric demand, surprised everybody and permanently dropped 10% across the board? What would that do to utility profits? Well, in a competitive industry, that would be really bad, right? That there'd just be less sales. Companies would be fighting for the remaining customers. In a regulated case, initially the profits would drop due to less revenue because it was a surprise. It wasn't baked into the formula. But in the next rate case, the rates would be adjusted up so that the utilities would make the same amount of revenue and the same amount of profit. Now, in following years, it might be more difficult to justify capital investments because they have excess capacity because demand dropped. So that would kind of reduce their opportunity for growing future profits. Solar, of course, produces lots during the summer, and that's roughly not exactly correlated with peak demand. Less peak demand means less capital investment. Less capital investment means less profit. So the utilities are not really wild about customers putting in solar and providing their own needs. Back in 2013, the industry association, the Edison Electric Institute, which represents the investor-owned utilities, published this paper called Disruptive Challenges. And they basically said that photovoltaics and net metering directly threaten the centralized utility model. And this went on. And interestingly enough, the first states in the US to consider higher solar fees or sort of trimming back net metering, that began in 2013. And this became a nationwide lobbying program. This was not accidental that net metering went away in Michigan and numerous other states. This was orchestrated, fought individually on a state by state basis, but there was certainly this broad idea across the utilities that, hey, we don't want what happened in Hawaii and California, where solar penetration, huge amounts of solar were installed. We don't want that happening to the rest of us. Now here in Michigan, we're a little late to the net metering world. We got net metering in 2008, which required net metering credit. And it also implemented this 1% cap on how much net metering the utilities needed to support to 1% of their peak generation capacity. And back in 2008, that seemed like that was going to be a very long time in the future because solar was very expensive just back in 2008. And there was not a whole lot of installation going on, certainly not by today's standards. But this is what happened. This is from a Public Service Commission report, and it shows the growth in distributed generation, right? Almost entirely customer-owned solar in Michigan, and it's just been exponential and kind of exceeded anyone's projections. As part of that law, of course, we lost the full net metering credit. The law stipulated that the credit would either be locational marginal price, which is about 3 cents a kilowatt hour, or it would be the utilities power supply component, excluding transmission costs. The MPSC in rate cases has determined that and has used the power supply component option in all of their cases. But the utilities are continuing to press for LMP instead because it's maybe half or less as much as even the power supply component. But PA 342 that did away with net metering missed the cap. So the cap was established back with net metering. It didn't get removed when we lost net metering. And we say it's a 1% cap, but it's more complicated and more restrictive than that. So it's 0.5% for customers under 20 kilowatts. Category 1, that's all the residential customers and some of the small businesses. And then 0.25% for 20 kilowatts to 150 kilowatts. And then there's 0.25% reserved for methane digesters, but Michigan doesn't have any of those operating. So that 0.25% isn't really available. So it's really 0.5% of peak demand for small customers and 0.25% for larger customers. This data is a year old. Unfortunately, it's the latest that was available, but it shows if you look at this category 1 program size in kilowatts, right? This is for category 1. So these are each 0.5% of their peak, except for consumers that has increased their limits. That's 1% of their peak. And UPCO, which has gone to 3% total cap or 1.5% for the residential customers. And you see the percentage of the maximum capacity under the cap that's in use, but that's a year ago. and the sales have been exponential since then. This was the only other data I could find. This was specific to Consumers Energy and their distributed generation projections. So you see the blue dotted line here is their projection of small category 1 sales, generally residential. And then this orange dotted line is the category 2 sales. And you see they're each crossing their limit sometime in 2022, according to this projection. So, time will tell. There is a bill in the Michigan House to eliminate the cap entirely. You can go read this bill. It's House Bill 4716. It's only 5 pages long, which is kind of amazing for legislation. Very, very short and to the point. There were hearings on this bill, and Chairman Scripps testified that there was no cross subsidy between solar customers and non-solar customers, and that there's no engineering reason for a system-wide cap. The House Energy and Technology Committee chairman has not scheduled a vote, and there was recently a press release saying he's looking at maybe something else they could do instead of this bill, and that they might triple the cap. So we simply need to apply pressure wherever we can on the Michigan legislature to try and get this to move. Meanwhile, DTE is opposing the bill. They are still insisting that private solar customers are being subsidized by the other customers. Consumers Energy is opposing the bill, and again, claiming that there's this cross subsidy between customers that simply does not exist. But they're holding fast to this position because how else do you oppose solar, right? I mean, who thinks solar energy is a terrible idea? We should end this cap because it's a vestige from net metering that is gone. The monopoly that we've granted the regulated utilities is for selling power. They don't have a state granted monopoly for generating power. We have the right to generate our own power. Our outflow onto the grid reduces distribution costs. It reduces line losses. When we use batteries, it protects us from utility failures. We have this right, and everyone else benefits from cleaner air. So that concludes my slides, and back to you, Melanie.
Thanks, John. That was excellent. I bet everybody has questions, but we're going to wait for the end on that. So now if we can turn it over to Matt, who's going to tell us a little bit about the how utilities based on his experiences. So Matt.
Thanks. And can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Well, hi, everyone. My name is Matt Casper, and yep, I am the Deputy Director at the Energy and Policy Institute. Today, I'm going to talk about ways utilities work to advance their political agenda, and I will be focusing on DTE and consumers. I'm just going to briefly go into the federal affairs component right now of DTE and consumers. We were talking about some of the federal legislation, and so what they want to accomplish in DC is often going to impact what happens in Michigan. So DTE operates one of the largest political action committees, a PAC, within the electric utility industry. You know, although they are the 15th largest power company in the US in terms of electricity generated, their PAC giving is often in the top 10. In fact, since the 2012 election, DTE ranks 8th in total federal PAC giving with over 3.2 million. And just as a reminder, PACs are composed of volunteer employee giving. That's what is the money in a PAC. But as you would expect, the executives, the lobbyists, the management at utilities, these are some of the larger donors to a company PAC. These executives and lobbyists, in addition to contributing to those PACs, you know, they'll give to federal candidates themselves, you know, at fundraising events. And executives are also likely to get the corporation itself to have that profit, take the shareholder money and make donations that are going to benefit a specific federal candidate over another. And I'll get into that in a moment. As for the Michigan Congressional Delegation in particular, it's not surprising that DTE is one of the larger contributors to Senators Peters and Stabenow, and have 12 of the 14 members of the House of Representatives from Michigan. They have received contributions from one of the PACs. But I do want to flag that Representatives Levin and Tlaib have signed the No Fossil Fuel Money Pledge, so they can't accept money from DTE and consumers. Although Levin has recently accepted DTE PAC money in the latest filing. We're waiting to hear if that was a mistake, and those contributions are going to be returned. Caucuses, as you can see on the slide, caucuses and political parties have PACs themselves, which are going to benefit their members, and those definitely receive donations from utility companies. And finally, federal candidates can utilize what are called leadership PACs, and these utilities donate to those PACs themselves, and the dollars can be used, to raise a politician's profile, but also most commonly, they're going to go towards campaigns, especially to those who are, the incumbents that are threatened. And politicians often want to demonstrate their fundraising capabilities and boast of that. And so they're going to try and get as much money as they can to their leadership PACs. And this also happens at the state level. Midwest Energy News had a really great analysis last year detailing how this played out in Michigan with certain electeds vying for some of the leadership roles in Lansing. So as I begin to transition to talk about what's really happening at the state level, John talked about the Edison Electric Institute. And so I kind of wanted to also touch upon how DTE and consumers utilize the trade associations, particularly EEI and the American Gas Association. There are others, such as the US Chamber of Commerce or the Nuclear Energy Institute, very influential at the states and also in DC. These trade groups have PACs. They hire lobbyists or have in-house lobbyists. EEI annually brings in about $80 million a year in revenue, and AGA typically brings in around 30 to 35 million a year. So these are pretty large groups and have a lot of money. You can see on the slide how much DTE and consumers contributed last year. And as far as we can tell, these are some of the larger contributions to third parties that want to influence policy on behalf of their members. In addition to the political and lobbying giving, trade associations are working to make sure their member policy priorities get enacted at all levels of government. So at the federal level, we've seen EEI coordinating to possibly with a law firm to sue the EPA over a Clean Air Act rule, or AGA might be organizing and submitting comments to the Department of Energy over energy efficiency regulations. At the state level, we've seen EEI and AGA get involved at dockets at public service commissions. And they also use their utility member money by then giving it to other third parties who will produce reports, possibly for in hopes of influencing other political decision makers. So I'd hear that money is sometimes going to the American Legislative Exchange Council or Americans for Prosperity, the group that you might see in different state races. The trade groups will also attempt to help members through the creation of these front groups or grassroots activities. So EEI has what's called the We Stand for Energy group. You can see on the slide what John was talking about, the grid costs talking point. And AGA has had many groups over the years, but one that we have seen pop up recently is called the Natural Allies for a Clean Energy Future. And I believe they've run some ads in Michigan in campaign seasons. So in addition to the ads they'll run in member territories, they'll possibly even attempt to drive public comments on regulatory and legislative issues by targeting members of the public. One event that EEI had been putting together in recent years was called the Campaign Institute. It was hosted at Georgetown's Business School, and it was basically like a training camp for utilities to learn how to, for the lobbyists and executives to learn how to run political campaigns. And they were using some of the most controversial efforts by utilities to defeat clean energy policies in recent years as case studies, as like the training materials. One EEI official at that meeting named solar net metering and renewable energy portfolio standards as ongoing challenges to the industry. At the December 2019 event, they had representatives from First Energy, so and Arizona Public Service. Some of you might be following or familiar with what's happening in Ohio with the First Energy scandal and the bailouts that was passed to keep some coal and nuclear units online and target renewable energy and energy efficiency. So First Energy presented to its peers at that meeting, and Arizona Public Service had spent $40 million in 2018 to defeat a ballot initiative that would have required the utilities in that state to meet 50% of their electricity from clean energy sources by 2030. So just briefly on the trades, I want to flag for all of you that their operating budgets are funded by dues that are paid by the utility companies, but those dues that the utilities, DTE, and consumers are giving, they look to recover those costs in rate cases at the Michigan Public Service Commission, and we've seen in recent years this happen with EEI and AGA. In fact, an administrative law judge in a DTE electric rate case, sided with some of the interveners that were fighting this issue, and recommended that the commission say, you know what, DTE shareholders, you need to pay for the EEI invoice. We don't want customers paying for this. Unfortunately, the commissioners disagreed with that ALJ opinion. And so when you pay your DTE electric or gas, or your consumers electric gas bills, you're partially subsidizing the work that these trade associations are doing on behalf of their members, and possibly even against the interests that you hold. Now with state affairs, we all know that DTE and consumers are busy building relationships, but across the state, about 96% of the state legislature has accepted a contribution from at least one of the PACs. In the 2018 gubernatorial race, you could see how they were spending their money, and it was almost like they were hedging their bets between the two candidates. But since Governor Whitmer's victory, they have definitely donated to her campaign. Detroit News covered the latest campaign finance report, and it showed an October fundraiser that was sponsored by DTE. The campaign brought in about $50,000, and DTE's PAC itself contributed $10,000. Executives and additional leaders in the companies will also contribute, their own personal money to candidates. And so I've pulled that data for you all to see today, since the 2018 election through today. And as you can see, executives, lobbyists, and management, the influential people at these companies have donated nearly $100,000 to Whitmer and other PACs across the state of Michigan. So again, this is different from utility PACs. This is like the CEO, CFO, the lobbyist money to the candidates. In addition to those giving streams, utility leaders can also utilize what's called Section 527 groups of the Internal Revenue Code to build relationships and influence state officials. The most well-known are the Republican and Democratic Governors Associations, Attorneys General Associations, as well as the Republican State Leadership Committee or the Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee. These organizations host fundraisers and can raise unlimited funds from corporations and individuals, and they help those donors funnel the donations to candidates in states with finance rules. Last year, DTE contributed a total of $65,000 to these groups. Consumers doesn't make this data very publicly readily or publicly available, and I haven't finished combing through the IRS reports to have that number of last year for you all. But we know in the past that they are occasional donors as well to these organizations. $15,000 to the Republican Attorneys General Association, $25,000 to the Democratic Governors Association in 2019. These entities, these political ones, will then give money to the state political parties, or they'll run advertisements, do the big ad buys in states on behalf of their members. So in the bottom right, that's just a screenshot of the RGA ad targeting Governor Whitmer in the 2018 election, and DTE had contributed quite a large amount of money to RGA that year. So believe it or not, I still haven't covered, the other pots of money, millions of dollars of money that DTE and consumers can dip into to influence decision makers. We know, based on annual reports filed to FERC and the Michigan PSC, that DTE and consumers have categorized over 124 million for civic, political, and related activities over the last 8 years. And of that 124 million, consumers energy has spent 90 million of it. So they outrank DTE here quite a bit. In fact, consumers ranks 8th across the entire electric utility industry in this civic, political, and related activities giving, which is, to me, very surprising. Now, we know where some of this money goes. It's the money to the lobbyists. It's money to the groups that I was mentioning just a moment ago, the Republican Governors Association, the Democratic ones. We also know that some of this money is going to the Michigan and Detroit chambers of commerce. It's going to the state political parties, and it's going to those corporate sponsorships you see, at Detroit Tigers or Detroit Red Wings games. But we don't have the full picture. Millions of dollars are going to third parties or other PR firms. So that's why I've got this bullet point of dark money. We just don't have the full picture. However, we do know that consumers has contributed at least 43 million to a front group called in Michigan, called Citizens for Energizing Michigan's Economy. This group has run advertisements, campaigns that target solar policies, and they promote certain candidates in primary and general election races over the past few cycles. So you might have seen this ad or article on this advertisements claiming that solar in Michigan is going to cause what happened in Texas with the blackouts. You've seen ads for specific candidates or electeds. You also have seen very odd mailers show up, possibly in your mailbox, from Citizens for Energizing Michigan's Economy. As for DTE, we know it has sent money to public relation firms who have helped organize and mobilize recipients of DTE Energy Foundation. Money to advocate on behalf of the utility company. And so I just want to take a moment of time to talk about the utility foundations. So in January 2016, Tony Early, who's the former DTE CEO, but at the time, Pacific Gas and Electric CEO, presented to the other utility CEOs in the room. And he talked about how that company was not looking just to re-energize the company PAC to try and outspend his previous company, DTE, but that he also was telling folks in the room how it wanted to coordinate their political giving with its operating dollars along with its charitable giving. So lining up the charitable money with the political outcomes or the political money. Now, I don't know if that became like a big deal, a big focus for the other utility executives in the room after that event. It's probably most likely that utilities already had that thought or that game plan, but important to bring up nonetheless that was a talking point at an EEI meeting. And DTE is just one example within the industry of doing just that. They had a group called Michigan Energy Promise. It registered in Michigan in January 2019. And what we saw throughout that year was a mobilization of charities and nonprofits that had received DTE Energy Foundation funding and then speak on behalf of a DTE position, such as net metering before the Public Service Commission, or speaking in front of the PSC when it came to Michigan's DTE's filed Integrated Resource Plan. We authored a report a few years ago that featured more utility case studies from across the country on how utilities use charities and nonprofits. And the New York Times detailed last year how utilities in Florida had been funding the state NAACP chapter in return to have the chapter oppose a solar program and support the utilities position on cutting energy efficiency goals. The chapter, the Florida NAACP chapter, has since joined with the group's national office to warn others across the country to not accept fossil fuel and utility industry money and then go and lobby on behalf of those companies. I'll end there. This is just my contact information. Always looking to talk about utilities, and just want to have you all sign up on our website so you can get our alerts on what my colleagues are all doing across the country and on utility companies. So I'll hand it over to you, Melanie.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Thanks, John. I have two quick questions. One, Matt, you had mentioned that the dues were able to be expensed. However, the PAC contributions are not. Is that, and the civic, political, and related funds, are those expensed or are those taken out of that formula?
Civic and political and PAC they should be always charged to the shareholders, the profits. Dues are getting recovered in the rate case. So you go back to John's the revenue formula. It's part of that operating the O&M part. Utilities will put it in there, but we do see errors pop up in rate cases at the state and also at the federal level of sometimes a misallocation, and this is becoming a really big thing with First Energy. First Energy customers were paying the lobbying costs. So there's investigations now taking place to see if customers were also financing the bribes that First Energy participated in that state. So yeah, it requires diligent accounting from commission staff in Michigan and at FERC.
Thank you. And John Richter, there was a question that I saw in the chat about the value of solar study. Can you respond to that? You mentioned it a little bit, but would you be able to just touch on where that came out and how it stands with the Public Service Commission?
Sure. So there was a resolution in the Michigan Senate directing the Public Service Commission to conduct a study having to do with how solar is reimbursed. The wording of the legislation kind of made it sound like, solar customers are getting a good deal and we need to change that. But the commission brought in the RAP, Regulatory Assistance Project, who conducted this study, and they provided a report. I put in the chat box there the link to the report. It's, I think, 70 pages or so. But it really just talks about it. It's very technical about different rate design methods that one might use in properly valuing customer outflow from solar, and it didn't have like firm recommendations or anything. So I think some of the senators were disappointed.
Thanks. And then I have one more question for Matt, and I saw some people were asking about slides. So I'm thinking I'll look to John Freeman and maybe Katie's going to help. I'm not sure if we're going to have the slides available on the GLREA website. But Matt, would you have any guidance for us in terms of, so we used to be a centralized generation business. Now we're looking at a more distributed generation to benefit the solar and environment. Do you have an example of a good state that we could try and emulate or that we can try and support? I mean, that's a broad question, but how do we help them transition from their, as John Richter has said, kind of perverse rate making challenges to the right one?
Yeah, well, I'm glad later today we're on the agenda is coalition building, because I really want to emphasize that, if there's one thing that I think maybe I take away is these are really big political machines, and there are those that want to go toe to toe with the amount of money and compete. And I'm thankful that those companies or those donors exist and want to get involved and spend against fossil fuel and utility money in races. But I believe this effort to change bad utility behavior and also reduce emissions at the same time is just best served when renewable energy folks partner with climate advocates, partner with environmentalists, partner with consumer advocates, oppressed frontline communities. Having better and stronger relationships with those partners versus the utilities is going to be better for everybody in the long run, and ultimately will, I think, change utility behavior. It's just a process that takes a long time. I think a lot of those coalitions exist in Michigan and also just in the other Great Lakes states like Illinois too.
Great, thanks. I think you just did a promo for everybody to come back to the coalition building session and stick with us. And it's 12 o'clock now, which is the end of ours. And I was going to turn it back to John Freeman. And I think there's probably a ton of discussion that we could all have on this. And maybe there's a solar stories in our future around this. I'll turn it back to you, John Freeman.
Well, thank you, Melanie. And I want to thank John and Matt for giving really impressive presentations. I think both of you have given us a lot of food for thought. And I think Melanie's idea of maybe bringing Matt back for a solar story might be something useful. So this program continues to 3 o'clock. And so I built in a full whopping 10 minutes for a break. So we will break now. And then we'll come back in about 10 minutes to talk about the internal reports of GLREA, because this is the meeting where we report back to members about activities. And so we will come back in 10 minutes to do that. So thank you very much. And you can stay on the screen. Don't break your connection, but just come back. Thank you.
Thanks, Missy.
Thank you so much, Kendall. And thanks first and foremost to GLREA for the opportunity to be here today